a leader, you got 7 key points that you need to consider. 1, engagement is a big deal, okay? You have to think of it that way, and I think we've already shown that in what we've just talked about, but engaged employees are safer, right? They're more productive, and they're more likely to stay with the company long term when they're engaged. So it is a big deal. It saves you money. You think about the training costs, bringing someone new in. If you can keep somebody on board for a long period of time, then you get the wealth off of all that training that you provided them, rather than taking that education that you provided and taking it somewhere else. You get to keep it within your organization. The other thing is that you kind of have to plan. You have to kind of policy up, if you will. We come up with policies all the time, don't we, about what we kind of expect from folks and the way we look at things. You know, when we talk about the OSHA or the hard hard skills, if you will, we have policies that address those things, but we hardly ever address how do we want our leadership to interact with our employees? How do we want those first-line supervisors? What kind of interaction do we want with them? What are we looking from these kind of things? So we want to establish sometimes a step-by-step or a general outline as far as what that involvement looks like. You are still going to have some measuring tools and have accountability and the consequences to go with it. But we want to think that process through. Otherwise, all you're doing is taking spaghetti and you're throwing it up against the wall, right? And seeing what sticks. So it's kind of, you want to think through that process. And again, how do we want interaction to happen between our employees, top management, our employees, our frontline supervisors? What do we want this to look like within our organization? And again, we talked about these hard skills. You know, anytime we have OSHA programs or requirements or anything like that, we have the industry practices and engineering practices. We also have the DOT and we have MSHA and we have all these other requirements on our business. But the one thing that we don't really talk about is those soft skills. What do we expect from our engagement? How are we going to engage our employees? In what way are we looking at this engagement piece? What do we expect from our leadership? You know, it's more than just the talk, right? We want them to walk the walk. We want them to lead, and we want them to lead in a positive manner. We don't want them just saying, do it because I told you so, but we want them to actually live what they're asking their employees to do, your employees to do. And of course, we're talking about coaching and feedback too. But we go back to this issue again where we're talking about the fact that, you know, one safety director, well, how many supervisors do you have for every employee? How many employees to every supervisor, right? Can he be everywhere at once? No. And so this is where we run into this next discussion, which is really the goal is going back to that people-based safety that we talked about. We want to have that peer-to-peer conversation. We want our people to talk to one another, because here's another one of these studies found that 93% of the workers see their coworkers doing something risky to where they could get hurt, okay? But only 25% of them were willing to say anything. They were going to wait for the boss, wait for the supervisor, he'll take care of it. Is that what you want in your organization? Because a lot of companies now are bringing in this mentoring program, right? So that when you bring new employees on, you put them with an older employee, someone on their level necessarily, where there's a lot of education that goes back and forth, because those older employees have a lot of good information to share, but they can see when people are doing things that are risky. They can bring it up, they can talk about it. This is something else you want to address in how to. What do you want that conversation to look like? And this is the key. Now, the negative part of this, right? We want people to be able to do exactly what this says. When we see something going wrong, we want to be able to say that. Mickey, whew, man, I don't know. That looks risky to me. Okay? The problem with this is we're only addressing half the issue at this point, aren't we? Because what's the other half of this conversation? Obviously, we want people to stand up and have that conversation and say, look, this is risky behavior. I don't think we should be doing this. What about Mickey's half of this conversation? Because now all of a sudden he has someone that's approaching him that's not the boss, that's a coworker. What do we want from Mickey on this half of the conversation? You want him to see it as a positive. You want these people to, not these people, you want your people to understand that you want to have this positive conversation. And what does that look like? You don't want it to always be negative. You don't want somebody coming to Mickey, man, this doesn't look safe. But Mickey goes, okay, yeah, you caught me. You know, this happened to me several times since I've been on the road now. And again, most successful companies find that when workers talk to workers, they don't wait for the boss to address issues, and they're safer, you know, because you got more than one set of eyes addressing issues, okay? So you want to foster that peer-to-peer conversation. How about giving the people the big picture? How about why, right? So the example I will use is that, you know, you have a janitor and he works in a healthcare facility and he's mopping floors all the time, and he has a cynical coworker that comes up to him and goes, man, don't you get tired of this? Every day you're mopping the floor. That's all you do is mop the floor. And he goes, I don't mop floors. I fight infections. People expect this room to be clean. And if I don't do my job, people get hurt. They can die from this. So my feeling, you know, his feeling is that his job is much bigger than just being a janitor or pushing the mop, but he's actually, the big focus is what? He's saving people's lives, basically. So think about when sometimes what happens within organizations when we get sucked into just that little engagement piece for us, right? Because that's all we end up doing is we just our little corner of the world, and that's where I see these little kingdoms being built, you know. And some of the times when we have people, especially workers, that are so sucked into just their corner of the world, we need to pull this back and say, look, here's how you fit into our organization. This is the bigger picture. This is how what you do helps us succeed. You know, so giving people that big picture, I think, is really important as well, okay? Making caring personal. We talked about this when we were talking about people-based safety as well. We talked about the fact that leadership must be personal, and you have to care at the human level.